Hey everyone, welcome back to the Raad Life, the show where we explore what it means to live fully, age boldly, and rewrite that second half of life on our own terms. I'm your host, Rod Gantas, and today's episode is all about midlife as power, not crisis. Joining me today is someone who's been leading that conversation. Boy, has he been leading that conversation. With grit, humor, and wisdom, Greg Scheinman, founder of Midlife Male platform. And if you don't know what Midlife Male platform is, you got to go check it out, because this man has been really leading this conversation in a way that is very unique, very timely, and I really appreciate it. Apart from being the founder of Midlife Male, he's a performance coach, podcast host. Thanks for being on, Greg, with me today, being in the interview seat, brand builder, and just an all-around force, like I said, in this longevity and reinvention space that we find ourselves in this midlife. He's built a life and a business around helping high-performing men find alignment in their lives, physically, emotionally, financially, and relationally. His story is one of transformation, resilience, and radical honesty, which is really so critical for us to basically embrace. And if you're anywhere near your 40s, 50s, and beyond, this one's going to hit home. So let's dive in with Greg and talk about what really means to win at midlife. Greg, thank you for being on the Raad Life. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. And you've built an incredible brand. Like I said, the Midlife Male. It resonates with so many of us, right? But before we get into the platform, take us back. Let's step back. What was the turning point for you? What cracked open the door for this reinvention?
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me, Raad. It's great to be here. I really appreciate it. And I'll take you back. First, you mentioned the word reinvention.
Yeah.
And I think that's what a lot of people say. And that makes sense, that I reinvented myself in transformation. But one thing that I do talk about a lot is that I don't believe that I reinvented myself. I believe that I released myself.
Mm-hmm.
And the difference there being that what I'm getting to do now, what I'm fortunately able to do, it's always been there. You know, who I am and what I'm doing now, it's always been there. And I just didn't permit myself to go in that direction. And again, to release myself into these other opportunities and these things that I am doing right now that feel genuine and authentic to me.
What do you think? What do you think the block was with that, Greg? What was holding you back?
I think the block was, and I think we see a lot of men fall into this, is that we follow the more traditional path. You know, I went to school, then you get married, they get a job, then you get married, then you have kids, then you hustle and you grind and you're judged in a way by salary and title, and you're chasing all of these things. And it goes by really fast.
Doesn't it?
You put your head down and you're doing all the quote unquote right things. And you look up, when you finally look up, as I said, you may be in your 40s. And for me, really, I looked up at 47. And 47 was the same age as when my father passed away. And I said, okay, you know, is this really what I want my life to be?
Mm-hmm.
You know, here I am now in bonus time, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And from the outside looking in, everything looks really good. The beautiful wife, the beautiful family, the beautiful house, the equity in the big company, the fancy car, the private school, the whole thing. And I'm going to tell you, it was not bad. Like my friends and I used to sit around and joke, we're doing better than most. You know, what do we have to complain about? You know, click another glass of tequila down and so on and so forth. But internally, I didn't feel so great. And some things were missing. And that was really the tipping point for me to start looking into what would it look like if I made some changes? What would it look like if I released myself into family, and fitness and health and a different way of looking at my finances and what true wealth really looks like, and food and nutrition, even fashion. Am I liking the way that I'm dressing every day? Having to put this suit on and go to this place and play this role. And then the kind of fun that I was having. And why is this actually fun? I don't think this is that much fun. And, so the things that and that's what really became my 6Fs, a new way of looking at what success looked like. And it was that swapping of salary and title for those 6Fs, and a different way of releasing myself into the next phase of life. And that really became Raad 47 to 50. That's really what it was.
Yeah, I want to touch on the 6Fs in a minute for sure, but I want to just hold on to this moment, because what you described is something that a lot of us actually experience. Now, it could be that you're doing it in your late 40s like you did. It could be like, and honestly, there may be multiple times that you experience this. Like I went through part of this in my late 40s. At 50, it seemed like I was just cruising. I was in that bonus time we were talking about. I was saying yes to everything. I was over saying yes to everything, right? It had impact. I wasn't really intentionally looking at things. But then at 60, again, there are moments. It's not just a one-time situation. It's a work in progress.
I agree with that. Yes, I think there are seasons of our life when these things come up. And I also say sometimes I know some really old 30-somethings and I know some really young 60-somethings.
Right.
So I don't think that it's not an exact number, and it's certainly not the same for everyone.
Right. So the thing though that I think a lot of people get stumped by, and it stumbles, and it maybe gives them, it discourages them from proceeding, because what you're talking about, especially with that radical, self-inventory, that looking at things without the certainty, right? Like you're stepping away from a place of certainty into a place of the unknown. And it's fascinating to me to come back to the realization that when we are younger, the uncertainty of things was actually a joyful, exciting outlook and perspective. And as we get older, the uncertainty becomes a weight around our necks that's basically stopping us from taking risks that we took when we were younger, and you could argue didn't know any better. But now that we know better, we have stopped taking those risks.
It's a really interesting point, especially since I spent almost 15 years in risk management. So I really looked at this through a couple of different lenses, and one of them was risk mitigation, risk tolerance, risk awareness, and then ultimately risk management. The only difference here was that the risk I was looking at was myself and assessing that. And I think a lot of what you're also referring to is, look, when we're young and we don't have as many obligations and responsibilities and commitments that we've made, I think your tolerance for risk is higher. Certainly, at least it was for me. Now, when you get into middle age, which is the space that I really work in, it really isn't just about you. Yes, this work is about you. And self-care isn't selfish, and guys that are investing in themselves, and even myself, are doing this. Just remember, when I started to explore this, I had a wife, 2 children, a mortgage, tuitions. It would have been just galactically irresponsible of me to throw all of that away to just only think about myself and what decisions and choices and things I was going to do for me to quote unquote reinvent myself or to transform. So a lot of what I talk to men about is, how can we do this responsibly? How can we honor our responsibilities, our commitments, our obligations, and at the same time grow and evolve and improve and be true and genuine to ourselves? And that's a really interesting intersection when guys there. But really, that's where the breakthroughs happen. And that's why I think it's so important to have a plan. And in working with men, they relate very well to business terms, the guys that I work with. And if you ask them to show you their business plan or their KPIs for their employees, or where they work, or the KPIs that they're under, the measurables, the quantifiables, the quarterly reviews, the financials, it's all there in business. But when you ask them to show you the plan for their life, they don't have one.
Yeah.
It's not there.
Yeah.
So how do you assess what you can do, what you cannot possibly do? How can you assess when you can maybe do certain things that you want to do? And that's where this whole notion of the Midlife Action Plan, a map, came into play.
So let's talk about that a little bit, because you raise a really good point, and again, it's that intersection. Like you're not happy. You understand that it's not exactly where you want to be. You don't necessarily know where that is, but you're at that threshold where you feel like you need to do something, and you don't necessarily know what that is. As much as you may know how to do that in your business, you don't really necessarily know how to do it in your personal life. So what does it take to get past that? Do you find that people just have to hit like a real hard transition, or is there ways for us to kind of proactively identify that and move into that space?
It's a great question. And again, I don't think there's one size fits all or one
Mm,
specific answer for this. I think for some, there is a life event that can trigger the need for change.
yeah.
It could be rock bottom. It could be massive success or an exit. So it's not always negative too. Sometimes, a lot of times it's positive.
Yeah.
I have guys that are so successful, if you will, that they feel guilty about it, that they've actually won too early in life. And now they
Mhm.
have all this runway in front of them and they don't know what to do with it
Yeah.
or about it. I call those problems of prosperity. Those are different.
Right.
On the flip side, it could be somebody who is also not unhappy, but they're also not really happy.
Mm-hmm.
They're languishing in mediocrity.
Yeah.
And they've been hanging out like this is, I think, the bigger chunk, if you will, that have been hanging out in the conformity and the complacency and the redundancy of life over a period of time.
Conventionality of life. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's tricky and sticky,
Mm-hmm.
in there. So you look at those kind of three buckets. There's a rock bottom and a tipping point moment. There's the languishing and mediocrity of it's not so bad, but it's not so great. What am I going to do about this? The easy answer is kind of nothing. The hard answer is let me think about this and figure out what something might be to do, back to risk and how much you can take or when you can take it. And then the third one is, hey, I've won, but I don't even know it. I don't even realize it. And I'm certainly not acting like it or feeling good about it. And yes, there are more, but those are typically the three avatars that I see regularly.
What's behind that third one, Greg? Usually, from your experience.
I think there's guilt in the third one. I think it's a different kind of loneliness where I've surpassed maybe the goals that I had for myself.
Mm-hmm.
I've surpassed friendships, relationships. I've been at the quote unquote top of the food chain doing this. They do say it's lonely at the top. So now who's around me? I have time and I have money and I might be doing a great job as a husband and a father with all this, but where is my purpose now? What is my identity now?
Mm-hmm.
Should I be giving back more, volunteering more? Do I feel guilty that I get to hike in Colorado on a Tuesday afternoon when most guys my age are just still working their asses off?
Yeah.
Now, do I need to be relevant? Get onto various cap tables or boards and investments or prove that I can do it again because I did it the first time. So that's a really interesting space. And it's harder, right, I think, for a lot of people to break out the violin, for those guys.
Right.
But that's also very real.
Yeah, it's very real. I mean, if the person is in that space, like you said, it's hard for sympathy to come their way in a way from other people, but for them, it's very real. And they are definitely struggling with something maybe from a different perspective than, hardship per se, but it's still that runway ahead of them. And they're looking at it and they're going, 20, 25, 30, 40 years, what now? What is my purpose? And then if their focus hasn't really been balanced to where they've incorporated some of that stuff, that sort of call it sideline purposes or engagement in other things, as they have gone to that point, it's now brand new. Like, how do I even go about doing that?
I'd say for a lot of those individuals that experience that type of success, and when I say success there, it's typically financial. They built a business, on that end. And that has been their identity. That has been their laser focus. That has been their hustle grind 24/7 entrepreneurship. And when you don't have that anymore, it's a very different feeling. This stuff happens with athletes. You hear it from athletes a lot. Mm-hmm. When they get cut from a team or they retire from the sport and they lose the locker room. But what they also really lose is they lose the discipline and what they're used to in the routine. Mm-hmm. There was mealtime and there was training table and there was tape to watch and there was practice and then there was a game. It was very regimented. And when that's taken away, now you're left with, okay, well, do I get up and work out today? Do I have to eat the same way anymore?
Right.
I don't have to study the film, necessarily anymore. And you can get lost in that.
Yeah. The motivations are not there that were there. And the things that basically had you on a disciplined plan. Yeah. I mean, what you're talking about is a shift between like being a high performance person and basically trying to achieve a high fulfillment in your life. Right. I mean,
well, I think that's a great point that you make. And I think we can touch on that, what's the definition of high performance? Are we always just going to associate that with career?
Right.
And what about having a high performance lifestyle?
Right.
And what is that?
And who defines what that performance is? Who
Correct.
defines what productivity is? Right. I mean, I'm kind of lobbing a softball at you, Greg, because I saw you post something about that, and it resonated with what I've been telling people for a long time. Hustle for the sake of hustle has its place, but productivity is something that isn't only one definition that applies. Like you could be productive doing the deep work you're talking about because it's a pathway to fulfillment. You can be productive basically putting out those reports. We have somehow lost the ability to allow for the fact that productivity is not a word that is defined only a certain way.
Correct. And I think there are a number of words that fall into that also. I think you look at ambition, for example.
Amen.
And it's another one I've talked about a lot. Ambition is typically associated, again, with career and business success.
Yep.
You're an ambitious person, which means you want to go higher and farther in your career.
Yep.
And in your monetary success. And you are a high performer. We'll go back to that in that regard. And it's, well, why can't you be ambitiously chasing freedom? Mm-hmm. Why can't you be ambitiously chasing a high quality of life, which means maybe I'm doing less with more focus. Maybe right. I've made a number, and that number is the one that works for me as a definition of wealth, because now I can round out these other areas of my life, which are equally important. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to just be judged by one merit. If I really want a high-performing lifestyle, well, then that can't be siloed into just one definition.
Right.
If I want to be considered an ambitious person, I want you to look at the aggregate, not just one individual area. I'm ambitiously trying to be a good husband, ambitious about being a good father, ambitious about being in good physical condition, ambitious about, again, my hobbies and my fun and my travel. And yes, I'm ambitious about being of service and growing a business and adding value to men's lives. But that's also within a framework. That's within a plan.
So let's shift gears and talk about the framework, right? Let's talk about the framework that you created around the 6 F's.
So it's twofold. So I'll give you, let's start with the 5 rules and where the 6 F's came from, basically.
Okay. Yeah.
So what happened was, going back to when I was 47, I had all these questions about what I wanted my life to look like and how were other guys doing things that looked like they were doing a better job than I was in all of these areas. So what I started doing was interviewing high performing, that's the best definition I had at the time, accomplished, high performing, ambitious, successful, whatever adjective and verbs you want to put on there, these types of men. And I was fortunate that I had a pretty good network developed, and I was able to start talking to some pretty great individuals who then turned me on to some other great individuals. And over the course of 3 years in interviewing almost 150 different people, I learned a thing or two from them and saw different similarities. And I was testing and retesting what they had told me to see what worked or not. And what came out of that were these 5 rules. And rule number 1 is knowing what's important is what's most important. And that was a big one. And that's where the 6 F's came from. It was what I thought was most important, again, was salary and title and chasing, the hit song, like my friend Billy says. What I realized was most important was chasing the hit life. And it wasn't just salary and title. It was, this is written on a pie chart, family and fitness, which is really health, finance, which is how much money do I need to do this, to feel good, food, because I love food and nutrition and eating better and getting healthy and putting down the booze. And as I mentioned, fashion and style, which is really about confidence and how I was feeling and my perception of myself and being perceived by others. And then fun, which was I wasn't having much of the good kind, the kind that I really wanted. And that became my definition of success. That became what's most important to me, a balanced pie chart around those things. Rule number 2 was if you don't know where you're going, you're never going to get there. And that's where this map came in, which was I spent years being rudderless without real direction and thinking that the only direction was straight up and you had to follow this linear path of job into career, into promotion, into equity, into partner, into exit, and so on and so forth. And that's what being on this wheel looks like.
Now, a lot of people would say that that's not rudderless. A lot of people, by societal description, would say that that is clear, goal-oriented, right? So when you say rudderless, I'm curious, how did you look at that as being rudderless?
So that's what I was told to do. It wasn't my destination. And what I mean by rudderless in there is that I never really felt like that was my path.
Right.
And then because of that, being the default path that I chose, all of these other areas were suffering, floundering around, rudderless. So I never got to them really. They were secondary and tertiary. And every time I went to put some emphasis or energy in those directions, what happened? Shifted back. Had to course correct because I thought that meant course correcting to get back to what I was supposed to be doing. So if you don't know where you're going, you're never going to get there. And you've got to be really clear on what that destination is for you. And what I figured out was maybe I'm not great at working for a big company. My definition of success, financially, status-wise, career-wise, the size of my house, didn't meet my partner's definitions in business. Some people are cut out for entrepreneurship. Some are not. Some guys you hand a boatload of money to, when they sell the company and they go, great, that's a boatload of money to go start a new company and make a boatload more money. Other guys like me, you hand them $10, I go, thank you, Seattle, good night. And I walked off stage, because this wasn't what I wanted. So that became, rule number 2 was if you don't know where you're going, you're never going to get there. Which led to rule number 3, which I call the ACE principle, aggregate, curate, and eliminate. And where this came from, Raad, is a lot of what we're doing now. These types of conversations, there's so much noise out there. We touched about this before we went on the air. There is so much noise out there.
Right.
It's information overload. More often than not, it's misinformation overload.
Right.
And the key is you've got to aggregate from everything that's out there. And then you've got to curate it down to what works for you. And then you've got to really be relentless about eliminating the stuff that doesn't. Because if you don't do that, life gets really confusing and really complicated really fast.
So let's talk about that for a minute, because I think 2 things are kind of critical if you're at this point, right? One of them is you got to know yourself. You got to have done some work on yourself, because some of those questions that you're posing, those are, or rules, those are questions that are only really answerable to your best of your ability at the moment in time, based on the amount of work and depth work that you have done with authenticity and honesty, right? Because if you haven't done that, then you're basically you don't have the resources internally to answer some of those questions to your best of your ability. And that doesn't mean that that answer is the most ultimate answer you're ever going to have, but it's the best
Correct.
one that you may have at that moment as a
Correct.
stepping stone.
Now, my work was in talking to these other individuals. The selfish work was doing these interviews.
Right.
It really, what I did was I put it out there under the auspice of hosting a podcast and writing a blog and doing, but what I was really doing was doing the work on myself.
I totally relate. For 10
Asking the
years,
questions that I wanted to ask,
Yep.
the people that I thought had better answers or insights. Right. And then I was taking what they were telling me, and then I was running it through this process of testing and retesting. Do I like it? Does it work? Do I not like it? What seems to fit with me? Like you were saying, authentically, genuinely. And is this sustainable? All of the criteria that I was starting to think about there.
Right.
So yes, it's exactly correct what you're talking about, which really is what I now get to do with men one-on-one in working with them, is taking what I've learned and continue to learn. And these guys that are just entering that process of doing the work, that's what we're doing together. Right. The first step is exactly what you said. When they reach out, and they realize, wait, I'm in a place where I have not yet done the work. I know things need to change. I'm not feeling a certain way. And they finally develop the self-awareness, the courage, and the wherewithal to reach out and look for some help and somebody who could help them. And I also always advise them, go through the process yourself too. You should be talking to different coaches. You should be talking to different people. You should be interviewing. You should be finding the right fit for you, because that's such a huge breakthrough step to just even want to enter the game.
Yeah, not every coach is right for everybody. Not every advisor. I mean, you're right, but again, it's you have to almost. I find that you have to almost get to the point where you're willing to almost drink from a fire hose, and then get clearer. Like you did it through the interview process of a podcast, right? You're basically exploring with other people, and indirectly you are also sharing the results of that exploration with others who may be likewise in that space.
Correct. I think it's similar to drinking from a fire hose. I call it, like we're going from shallow and wide to narrow and deep.
Exactly.
And that's what's happened. And because of that, there's not as much fluctuation and as much questioning for me now. But at the very beginning and early on, that's all there was.
Yeah.
Was a ton of questioning and a lack of clarity.
Yeah.
And as you start to narrow that funnel, things become clearer.
Yeah.
For you. And then, once you have that map, it's like an operating system. Even on your phone, like once you've got 1.0 or 2.0, going to 2.1, 2.2 is a lot easier. But when you got nothing, that first version, that first operating system that you develop, it's not perfect, but it's certainly better than nothing.
It's a starting point.
Yeah. And you got to work some of the bugs out, and then you do some of the updates. And, that's what I do now, quarterly, annually, looking at the plan. How does 24 change into 25? 25 is now going to evolve into 26. And you're making updates and pivots as needed. But by the way, if more of it's working, then it's not leave like the stuff that's working. I've started to get comfortable with leaving that alone. And again, not having to fix every little thing that's not broken either. Not every upgrade ends up being an upgrade. Sometimes you try to upgrade too many things, you end up downgrading your quality of life.
Right. Well, we all know that from operating systems where work touches fine and then a new release comes in and now we're basically buggy for a while.
Correct. And what did it do? It set back 6 months of other progress because now we got to learn the new system that wasn't necessary to have a new system. But what the bigger picture and the bigger goal was, we should have been going over here instead of doing that.
Well, and what you're bringing up, Greg, it's interesting because it applies to a lot of stuff, right? It applies to what you embrace and why you are embracing it with clarity and intentionality, right? And what you are leaving behind too. Like once you get to that point where you have that clarity, my perspective on it is there's no shortcut to this. Like to get to that point is just you just have to go through that fire hose. You have to find your own funnel. You have to get clearer, and you're doing it for yourself because it's important to do it for yourself.
Yes. I will say I think it's simpler than it's made out to be. And the it that I'm referring to, I think life in general is simpler than we make it
Simpler
out.
than, yeah.
I think midlife is simpler than we make it out to be. I think we're very hard on ourselves overall. And I'll get to the last two rules because they allude to this stuff too. I think we're very hard on ourselves. I think more is easier. I think complicated and messiness is easier than simplicity and scaling back. And that's why rule number 4 is show me your calendar. I'll show you your priorities.
Mm-hmm.
It's as simple as it gets. What we schedule gets done.
Yeah.
You told me to be here at 3 p.m. Central Time. You sent me an invitation. It's on my calendar. It's my responsibility to show up at 3 p.m.
Yeah.
Prepared and on time.
Yeah.
If you tell me your family's important to you, and I ask you to show me your calendar and you can't show me any time that you're spending with your family, how important is it really? If you tell me your health is important to you and I ask you to show me where on your schedule your workouts are this week and you can't show me that, how important is it to you? Yeah. So I think why it may seem disciplined and regimented or rigid, and some people have said even robotic or anything, no, it's the opposite. It actually creates a tremendous amount of freedom. And it shows you where all the open space is. Yep. And it shows you where your priorities are and where your mistakes and your missteps are.
Right.
And it's measurable and quantifiable. And you can look at the week that was and the week ahead. And these become very yes or no questions. And that was life-changing. Yep. And then the last one is rule number 5, grace, gratitude, and latitude. Because like I said, we just are very hard on ourselves. Comparison, keeping up with the Joneses, the pressure
harder and harder with social media. Yeah.
All of these things. Yep.
Yeah.
Doom scrolling. Everybody's got the perfect life and the perfect filter on everything. And they only show you, what they want you to see. And there's always some new game-changing product or brand or thing. And now we all got to live to 100 and biohack our way there. And then we're going to figure out how to afford that. I mean, the list, it goes on and on and on. And that doesn't sound like a whole lot of fun to me.
No.
That doesn't sound like maximizing middle age to me.
No.
So when you go back to the simplicity aspect of things, basics over biohacking, scheduling on your calendar, waking up, with energy and going to bed tired, the good kind. Life by design, not by default. Mm-hmm. That stuff starts to get interesting to me.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like when you get there, there's a sense of ownership of your life that maybe was not there before?
Absolutely. I think having agency over the actions you take and the choices you make is a really empowering feeling. Mm-hmm. And I don't think you need to be an entrepreneur or a CEO, or quote unquote in charge in order to feel that way.
Yeah.
I think there's a misperception around that, or you run your own business, or you had an exit, or it's easier for this guy or that guy. And it may be, but comparison is also the thief of joy, and it doesn't matter what's going on with anybody else. You do have control. All of us have control. What we have to do is plan for around what our realities are. And what I mean by that is you might be working for somebody else, and the requirement is that you are at your office from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. If your answer is because of that, I can't be in good shape or I can't exercise, that's a choice that you are making.
Right.
Because there are people in the 5 a.m. I've seen them at the gym. There are people in the 6 a.m. class. There are people and the 5 p.m. and the 7. And there are people that go out, and leave for lunch and exercise. Mm-hmm. If it's because I have children or because I have a wife or because I have this or that, my point is, you still have control of your controllables.
Yeah.
And you can do the very best you can. Now, you may not be in Olympic athlete shape. If your goal is to raise 2 young children, work from 9 to 7 every single day, be a good husband, it may not be the time to train for an Ironman. That may not be the season of your life you're in.
Right.
But again, I find all of these situations and circumstances of real life, I find them really interesting as a puzzle and how you want to put it together.
Well, and just to go back to what you said about it's simpler than we make it out to be. Because I think when you look at all the challenges and you just keep piling on the challenges and the reasons why you can't, and whether it's self-sabotage or it's arguing for your limitations or not prioritizing the things, first of all, if you don't have the clarity, then you're basically handicapped. You're basically handicapping yourself, right? But if you also make it a complex situation that is even more arduous, like Sisyphus rolling the rock up the hill, right? Then it becomes not manageable. But if you simplify it, if you look at it from a perspective of possibility, the fact that uncertainty is an appealing thing, not a thing that you should basically shy away from, I think then you give yourself a chance potentially to work through things, even if it's at a slower pace. And then the lack of comparison, just because somebody may be ahead of you, doesn't mean that you basically should not do what you think you want to do, even if you achieve only a certain milestone success in it versus somebody else.
There it is. You mentioned the word possibility.
Yeah.
And I think it's a great word. And one of the things I love about possibility is taking possibility and turning it into probability.
Mm-hmm.
And what does that look like? Okay, got possibility. This is but what we really want is we want probability of success. Yeah. And what do I mean by that is, to your point about running in the pace that's there. Oh man, I don't have an hour today, so I'm going to not work out. Mm-hmm. It's another physical example. Or it's, I don't have an hour today, but I have 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to still work out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, get the 15 minutes.
One of them is doing nothing and saying, I can't, I don't, unless it's perfect, unless I have my full hour, then I'm not going to do it at all. The other one is saying, hey, I'm going to get in 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever I can do today. And I'm going to keep chipping away at that each day. And that's really what consistency looks like in there. And that's possibility into probability. The person who keeps canceling because they don't have the full hour, they don't do that. Where are they going to be at the end of the year versus the person who chipped away 10, 15, 20 minutes each day and made the most of what was available to them? Where are they going to be at the end of the year? Which guy are you betting on? Who's more backable to you, know, on there? And I think those are the types of things when we get back into simplicity, those are very simple questions. Mm-hmm. Better to cancel because you don't have the full hour, or to work out, for 20 minutes because that's all you have. Better one or better two.
Right.
You can ask yourself that question all day, every day.
Yeah.
Should I go through the drive-through and stuff my face, with fattening fast food? Or should I have made a sandwich the night before?
Or even go get some things and make a sandwich now versus drive through. It's a
plan in advance, right?
Yeah.
My point is that there are simple, basic choices, and we make thousands of them every day. When you make the better choice, Raad, the majority of the time, the majority of your life gets better. Right. It is just that simple. And that does not discriminate, whatever age, stage, gender, or anything you're at. When you make the better choice, the majority of the time, the majority of your life gets better. And more often than not, you know what the better choice is. We know.
Say that again, because I think it's super critical to make that point. We know at the end of the day, deep down inside, we already know. It's like when we started talking about this, it wasn't a reinvention. It was about you being more yourself and having a grounded agency in that, right? That you basically owned, because it affected and rippled into everything else in your life from that core, from that foundational core, positively, with possibilities turned into probabilities. And then for some people, what we're talking about here, and I think for guys especially, I mean, it's changing. It's for sure changing. And I think it's somewhat generational, maybe just the nature of where we're at, society, there's sometimes a conflict between vulnerability and strength. Like it's regarded that one is actually the antithesis of the other, right? When in truth, and if you can talk about this, Greg, because I think you're very well poised to do this, is the two are partners, right?
I agree with you there. I think vulnerability is a sign of strength.
Thank you.
I don't believe it's a sign of weakness. I also don't believe that traditional, if you will, definitions of strength necessarily are all that vital either. Meaning, like, I can be physically strong.
Yeah.
So what? Like, what am I masking or what am I covering up? I could be physically strong and emotionally weak.
Yeah.
I could be financially strong, but physically weak.
Mm-hmm.
You can be all of these things. But when you're partnering strength and vulnerability specifically, like you said,
Mm-hmm.
I think they do go hand in hand. I think vulnerability is very much a strength. I also think that it is a muscle, like any other muscle, that needs to be worked out. It needs to be exercised.
Yep.
It needs to be flexed. Right. Because otherwise, like any other muscle, it'll atrophy. If it doesn't get used, it's certainly not going to be strong.
Well, and you need to develop good form in how you're exercising it, right? Because it can't just be loose cannon vulnerability. It can't, like, there's a good form of doing it, and it's as individual as the person who's doing it. But
it's a great point.
Yeah.
Poor form, you'll break down. It's a great analogy.
Yeah.
I mean, you may be able to deadlift 400 pounds for a while with poor form, but eventually your back's going to go. And at 52, my back, like, form is much more important. Form and function are super, super important, more so than load and actual, strength in numbers. Whereas to your point on the vulnerability side of it, that takes form as well. I mean, look, we could have a great conversation here, but it's probably not the place for me to throw up all over you with all of my vulnerable problems right now. Yeah. Not really the time in the forum for your listeners to hear that.
Right. But you're coming with authenticity. You're coming with approachability. You're coming with accessibility, right? In your true form. And that in itself is an encouraging thing. Like, for a lot of people that may be listening to us, right? I mean, part of the challenge, I think, for midlife too is not only what is next, but what is the legacy, right? What is the, you touched on identity, right? What is my identity now? But it's also, what is the legacy? Like, what is my leave behind? And it's not necessarily, not in the financial sense, right? But like in the personal values based, what are we hoping to leave behind? Whether you have kids or if you don't have kids, like your impact that you're talking about. So how much of that becomes part of this journey?
What I was starting to jot down as you were talking, because the thought was so good, was, we think about legacy, about what are we going to leave behind? What are people going to think about us when we're gone? That's legacy. I think about what do people think about me now?
Yep.
And living your legacy every day, and living your message every day, because if you do that, your legacy writes itself.
Right.
If we're always thinking about outcome over action, we may never actually get to that outcome. But if you think about the outcome you want, or you think about the legacy you want to leave, I'm not opposed to that. Go ahead. Make your plan again. Think 3 years, 5 years out. Think, upon my deathbed, what do I want people to say about me when they're eulogizing me, or but the key here, Raad, is you've got to reverse engineer back.
Yeah.
To the annual, quarterly, monthly, weekly, right down to the daily action steps that you need to take to ensure that that outcome becomes inevitable, that legacy becomes, it's through your actions. If you want to be described as a philanthropic individual, but you actually don't do anything philanthropic, until like maybe right before you pass away, or maybe you run out of time and you don't do it, you're not going to be described that way. But if you are actively engaged in philanthropic endeavors, now in my 50s, into my 60s and beyond, like that is your identity. That's who you are. It's like how we perceive ourselves and how we want to be perceived by others. You know,
Right.
there's a guy, Cody Jefferson, who's one of the early interviews I did. He says, this is who I am, so this is what I do. And it makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Your legacy is a culmination of how you live every single day. Your
Right.
outcome is a result of the actions you take and the choices you make each day. It's not the other way around.
No, I think there's and I'll tell this to people who don't realize this because we haven't really said anything about it, but there's a reason why I reached out to you, and there's a reason why the more we talk, the more I realize that there's a connection and a kinship in the way of thinking, because I just kind of handed that legacy thing to you, and you pretty much said what I've been thinking for a long time, that legacy is not what you leave behind. Legacy is what you live today. And to touch on the philanthropic example, for example, if your philanthropy is, then there's no right or wrong. I mean, everybody does it in different ways. But if your philanthropy is to go to the philanthropic events and donate, that gives you a sense of purpose. That basically represents your philanthropy in a certain way. But it doesn't mean that the person who basically is volunteering in person at that soup kitchen, for example, those 2 hours a week or whatever, is any less, and they're living their legacy. It's just like you're living your legacy. So there's so much room for that. But the fact that you are looking at it, or we're looking at it as a daily thing that we do. It's not what they say about us after we pass away. It's what is your legacy today.
Correct. And let's not overlook one other thing there. Do the best you can. Like genuinely do the best you can. Like we talked about, you always know.
Yeah.
Is this the best I can do? Am I proud of this? When
Yeah.
I look in the mirror, do I like the person looking back at me? Now, maybe doing the best you can do is showing up and stroking a check.
Yeah.
That's what I can do.
Yep.
With everything else going on in my life, that is my bandwidth and that is my capacity.
Yep.
Maybe the best you can do is volunteer your time. I think whatever the example is, what it comes down to is, how do you feel about yourself and what you are doing and how you are living? And if you're good with that, then that's great. That's how you go from good to great. If you're not good with it, then that's where you have to think about, how am I going to make some improvements? Where am I not doing as well as I want to be doing? What am I faced with? And again, not immediately being able to have a 180, but really think it through.
Right.
It's okay. What can I do? What's the first step? How much time might this take? Am I really going to be committed, to this? Again, that hard, real, vulnerable, raw look in the mirror. And then you could either have a pity party about it, or you can choose to do something about it. There's a whole thing on ageism last week. It blew up on social and LinkedIn and everywhere else, and all back and forth. And there was a guy who was saying that he was unhireable at 58. And then there were other people that were commenting that once you declare yourself unhireable, you're certainly going to be unhireable, there. And then there was, yes, ageism exists. And then it was, okay, but if it exists, we can't sit around with this misery loves company and blame just ageism and make an excuse. That doesn't fix anything. But yet, this whole attitude of just pick yourself up by your bootstraps and go on anyway. It was a whole thing, that was in there. And I'm not suggesting that any sides of the debate, let's just call it a debate, okay, were inherently wrong. However, when it all came, was said and done, you either have a victim mentality or you do not. You either want to join the misery loves company community, or you refuse to play the victim, are not looking for comfort in misery, but are looking to transcend what your situation and circumstance is. Because for every person that has been aged out, let's say, of an organization or something, or wants to pin it on ageism, and again, I believe it exists. We're off on a little bit of a tangent here, but maybe I'll bring it back around. There are individuals within that same organization who have transcended age. And why? Because they have more value. There isn't a company out there who is getting rid of their highest performer. There isn't a CEO who is getting rid of his executive assistant who's been with him for 30 years, who knows him backwards and forwards, solely because they hit a specific number.
Right.
Now, are there companies that require age and all that? I get all that. But the point is, how valuable can you make yourself in any position you're in life? And the more valuable you are, the better your chances are of being able to have greater control over your destiny, not being the first one that they're telling to walk out the door, or you got to go.
Well, and that touches on continuing to continuously be curious, grow, be engaged in stuff that excites you, that really speaks to you, to where you are basically finding yourself building those values and increasing those tools and growing, right? I mean, that's sort of like you can get older, or you can continue to grow.
Yes. And you also, while you're growing and evolving, rather than the opposite, conformity, complacency, redundancy, which we touched on.
Right.
Where am I? What's going on here? What am I seeing coming around the bend? What do I have to look out for? Back to, again, how am I living my message? How am I thinking? How am I acting? What's on my calendar? Maybe I can't, maybe I shouldn't take this for granted and think that I'm going to be here forever.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there is a proactiveness to what we're talking about.
Right.
Which is an empowering thing. Whereas you may not be the CEO of your company, you are the CEO of your own life.
Yep. And you can empower your own life.
Correct.
Yeah. Proactively empowering your own life, taking ownership of it, claiming agency. So it's a perfect segue as we're wrapping up here, Greg. What excites you about this movement that you've helped ignite? Like right now, it seems like there's a lot of possibilities, but I'm curious about, just from your perspective, what excites you about this movement? What's next?
I think it's to your point. I think it's like a lot of people are always asking what's next. And like legacy, I'm thinking what's now. You know, what excites me right now is what we're doing.
Yeah.
People ask me what I do for fun. This is what I do for fun.
Yeah.
What excites me right now is what's happening in the world, that I have this ability right now and this freedom and this, I call it a luxury, and that I get to talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
I get to speak to interesting guys every day.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are in a podcast and wide media format like this. Others that I'm working with one-on-one. There's 25,000+ that are reading the newsletter that goes out every week. What excites me right now is just having a voice and using it.
Yeah.
Because what happened for me, and I think it happened for so many, is I had lost my voice, or I didn't allow myself to have one, because there was going to be judgment around it. Mm-hmm. It could jeopardize my career, if you will. Maybe my clients wouldn't be happy with it, or my partners wouldn't be happy with it, or even my spouse might not be happy with it. Or now I deal with a whole different side. My family thinks I say too much, in there, and we clear certain things and do that. But you ask what excites me and what's next.
Yeah.
What excites me about what now is that there's so much opportunity and there's so much momentum. And that there's this opportunity for people to live happier and healthier and wealthier and longer and stronger. And there are more options and choices around that than ever before. And that's what excites me for now and next, to be able to share that with as many people as I possibly can and make a positive impact wherever I can, so that the people that I work with can make better choices on their own. Giving them the tools and the access and the insights and the network. At the heart of that, Raad, is we're a how brand at Midlife Male.
Yeah.
Not a why brand. We're a how brand.
Yeah.
Once you get beyond that why you want to be a better husband, why you want to be a better father, why you want to make more money, we get into the how.
How.
And that's like what really, really excites me, is putting that together. And when you see people that not only have found their why, but then they've found their how, like that's really, really remarkable, because they are waking up with purpose and intention and a plan each day, and they are executing. And that's like really cool.
Well, that's that proactive self-empowerment, right? In action. Because the why, which a lot of people just get sort of it's open-ended, the why, right? And you and I, when we first talked, you made that very clear, that point, and I could totally see the distinction. It's about, okay, we've identified the why, and maybe the why adjusts over time with continuous input, and it's malleable, and it gets reshaped, and the clearer you get, the more the why basically takes form, whatever. But the how is where the work is, and it's where the fun is, to use one of your F's.
Well, it's a difference also between, look, I'm not a therapist. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a philosopher. I'm not any one of those things. If you want to call it, we call it coaching. We're calling it coaching now, and I wish there was a better word for that, but I don't know what it is right now. So if anyone's got one, send it in, on there.
Right.
But from a coaching perspective, it's about how you get better, how you get from where you are today to where you want to go. And what is that process going to be? What do I have to hold you accountable to? What is that standard? We can philosophize about all the different ways you could make money. And at the end of the year, you have spent a lot of money philosophizing about how to make money. You may or may not have made any. But there are measurable and quantifiable ways to actually make money. And what we need to get to, how do we get to as quickly as possible? Which one of them do you want to go? Which path do you want? Do you want to put it in this investment or that investment? What's your tolerance for risk? Do you want to be, put
it in something.
Correct. Because action is going to help get you the outcome. Do your homework, aggregate from all the options that are out there, curate down to which one feels right to you or which ones feel right to you, eliminate the ones that aren't, put it in motion. And if we keep looking at the portfolio each quarter and it's going well and things are good, then we leave it alone and it grows and it compounds and so on and so forth. If the strategy is not working, we are going to make a change. You could do this with your golf swing. Okay, you could do this with, the best golfers in the world have fired their coach at some point that they've been with for 10 years, hire somebody new to break down their swing, go back to square one and build it back up again.
It's an ongoing work in progress. It never ends.
We never graduate from any of this. There will be no point in my life where I can say I'm leaving the gym today and I am finished. I have graduated from fitness and I will stay in the same condition for the rest of my life without doing anything. My marriage will not stay the same. Family will not stay the same. Business relations, it does not discriminate. There's no graduation.
No. And change is the only constant, right?
The only one I can tell, so far, the only certainty is that it's going to continue to be uncertain.
Right. So embrace the uncertainty and find strength and joy in that. Greg, I want to say thank you. I know I want to be sensitive of your time. You've been very generous with it. So I want to say thank you again for being on. This was really powerful. And I think we both agree it's very much needed. This kind of conversation is very much needed.
Listen, I applaud you for bringing it to the forefront in all the conversations that you have and what you're doing at your stage of life, continuing to be curious, continuing to have engaging conversations with all kinds of great people out there, and releasing your own self and reaching out. Even the way that we first met, what we're talking about here is just connecting dots. Right. And ultimately, you keep connecting dots and putting good people around good people in good places and things have a good way of working out. So congratulations to you for all that. I'm excited for everything that's ahead. And I appreciate you also going in order, like we talked about at the beginning. You know, when you start going in order, it keeps things simple.
Right. Right. I think we overcomplicate things, and that's just sometimes the nature of our heads, you know, but it can be simple, and understanding that, you know, guidance and inspiration, you know, is the a starting point, but action is the only way that it gets done. So you could still sit there and you know, delve into it and immerse yourself in it, but at the end of the day, action is what it gets done. And action can be simple, it can be incremental, it can be small successes that build onto each other. It can be taking that 5 pounds equivalent of 5 pounds of weight and working it out in 15 minutes when you don't have an hour, and then next thing you know, you're doing 50 pounds and you're doing an hour. And there's a pace and a path. And at the end of the day, you're investing in yourself, because if you don't do that, then you don't have it to give to other things that are important in your life. Relationships, work, curiosity goes away. We all, I guess the thing that's important to mention to a lot of people, especially guys, is you're not alone if you're feeling this. You're not alone if you're going through this. This is something that we all encounter. Is just, what do you want to do about it?
Yeah, you saved the best part for last. Absolutely not alone in any of this. The thing with guys that it tends to be is that we tend to hold more in.
Yeah.
We tend to think about these things more privately.
Right.
We're more secretive about it. We don't want to raise our hand in public. The vulnerability that you talked about
Yep.
before.
Right.
We don't want to comment or engage publicly, whether it's on a post or an article or a discussion or anything. But it's there's this incredible discrepancy between the amount of public engagement I get and the amount of direct messages, emails, and texts I get.
Yeah.
It's like, this is amazing stuff. You know what? Put that over there where everybody can benefit from it. But why? We're hesitant.
Yeah.
On there. And I'm hopeful that we can continue to make progress there as well, to make it more common, to make it more acceptable, to make it more frequent, even just for guys to feel good about commenting, engaging, sharing. And I don't mean this in like we have to sit in a circle and cry and everything has to be so deep and so vulnerable and touching on masculinity issues. But like, hey, if you feel something and you want to say something, like there shouldn't be stigma or embarrassment around putting something out there. So even though I disagree, you know, with like, I always like appreciate somebody that has the courage to put themselves out there and have a point of view and a perspective and a feeling or an emotion. Those are great things.
Like you said, vulnerability and strength, they're partners. They're not in conflict with one another. And it's a muscle that you just have to build. And if you're in the company of others that are, you know, also allowing themselves to be in that space, it builds camaraderie. It builds stuff. Again, we said you're not alone. If you're feeling this stuff, you're not the only one going through it. Others have gone through it before you. Some have succeeded in navigating it. Some of them are still in it. It's not an age specific thing. It could happen at 30. It could happen at 70. It could happen at, it's not an age thing. It's a where you're at in phase of life. And
I'll just say one more thing to that. Sorry, you know, that there doesn't have to be a coming out party for this either. You know, like, you don't have to declare yourself vulnerable one day. You don't have to make a grand announcement. You know, look at me for the last 52 years, I've said nothing. And now look at me putting all of this stuff out there. Yeah. If you don't like big groups, if you don't want to raise your hand in public, if you don't want, you don't have to. Right. You can find again whatever works for you.
Right.
There's certain things I don't want to go to or participate in, and it's just not really my thing. And then my way of doing things doesn't have to be yours. But do I like to talk to somebody? Yes. Do I have somebody that I go to talk to? Yes, I do. My point is, whatever you are looking for, again, to give yourself what you want, to be the best version of yourself, it exists. It's out there. You just need to go find that. But anybody else's way doesn't have to be your way. this group, this event, this format, that thing. Doesn't have to be. You get to choose about that too.
Well, I appreciate you, my friend, being on. And for our listeners, if today's conversation lit something up inside you, go follow Greg at Midlife Male. Check out the Midlife Male podcast. Subscribe to his newsletter. I get it every week, and it's great stuff on there. Most importantly, start asking yourself, like, what does your version of success look like at this point in your life on your terms? And again, on your terms is sort of the critical thing here, and give yourself permission to have it be on your terms. And it's a work in progress. It never ends, but it's also an exciting opportunity to really connect with yourself in a way maybe that you hadn't done before. Let go of those old scripts, let go of those things that you basically thought were conventional ways if they don't work for you. And if they do, great. And if they work for you in a certain percentage, then that's fine. That's on your own terms. If you've liked today's episode, please subscribe and leave a review. I love to hear from people about what they think about this. I ask for it all the time, and sometimes I get it, sometimes I don't. But it really is important for me to understand how these sit downs, these opportunities to touch base with people that I find inspiring, like Greg, and what they're doing, I feel is very important. And let me know your thoughts about that, about your, how are you navigating your next chapter, if you will. Until next time, I'm Raad Gantis, and remember, you're not running out of time. You're just getting started. Thank you, Greg, for being on. I really appreciate you, my friend.
Raad, thank you very much. Really enjoyed this.